Algebra 2 Notes 5.3 Part 1, Solving Polynomial Equations. All right, why don't you guys go ahead and work on the first 4 problems, just reviewing some polynomial factoring techniques that we've learned earlier in the year. So go ahead and pause the video and then try the first 4 problems. All right, number 1, you could first take out the greatest common factor, and then you can break it down further into the 2 binomials. Number 2, this one's just a quadratic trinomial. Remember, you're trying to break up that 2x squared, so 2x and x, multiply to be 15, 5 and 3. Now, these don't add up to be 11 because remember there's the outside that you have to take the 3 times. So 2 times 3 is 6, plus 5 times 1 is 5. So 6 plus 5, that's how you get the 11. All right, perfect square trinomial, we're factoring it the same way. The only thing at the end, you can rewrite it as 1 factor all squared. And then difference of squares, this one you could first take out a 4 and then break it down further. So we're just trying to factor as far as we can go. All right, let's look at the new techniques for today. First one is factor by grouping. So what you're going to do is look at the first 2 terms here and see what can I take out of both of those. So in this case, you can take out an x squared and then write what you have left. So if you take out an x squared, we'd be left with x minus 3. Then try the next one. Now this one you actually can't take anything out. If you can't take anything out, you might write a 1 there. That will help you with the next step. Okay, so now kind of the same idea as how we knew like to take an x squared out up here because it was in both of them. We're going to do that same technique right here. What can we take out of both of these and pull to the front? So if you notice, both of them have that x minus 3. So we can pull that out of both of them, and when we do that, that means we're putting it out front. So in that first one, when I take out that x minus 3 and cancel those out, I'm left with the x squared. And then on the second one, when I take out that x minus 3, I'm left with a 1. Okay, so now if this were a minus, we could break it down further by difference of squares. Since it's a plus, that's all we can do. All right, so that's factor by grouping. Factoring a quartic. This one is very similar to a problem we've done earlier in the year. We could think of that as like x squared plus 3x minus 54. So if we think about how we factored that one, we'd break it up x and x. Multiply to be 54, add to be 3 would be 9 and 6. Positive 9, negative 6. Same way, but instead of breaking up the x squared, x and x, since ours is x to the 4th, we're going to break it up x squared and x squared. All right, so again, multiply to be 54, add or subtract to be 3 was 9 and 6. If we check that inside, 9x squared, and that outside, 6x squared, to get a 3, it's going to be a positive 9 and a negative 6. Okay, so now if we can factor further, we will. Again, if that were a minus sign right here, we could factor further, but since it's a plus, we can't break it apart. Also, if this were difference of squares, if 6 were a perfect square, then you could break it apart. In our case, we can't simplify anymore, so that would be factored. All right, let's look at solving a quartic. So we're trying to find all the zeros. So the first thing we need to do is get it into the correct form. So we need to subtract that 2 to the other side. So this one, we're going to break it apart now. We could either do 2x squared and 2x squared or 4x squared and 1x squared. 2x squared and 2x squared is actually going to be the wrong answer. So if you want to wait and not write that down for a minute, I'll show you why it's wrong. Then we say multiply to be 2, 2 and 1. So if I check that inside and that outside, there's no way for 4x squared and 2x squared to get me 7x squared. So if I back up a little bit, instead of doing 2x squared and 2x squared, try 4x squared and x squared. I think that will get you what you need. There we go, 4x squared and x squared. So we say multiply to be 2, and I want it to try to add or subtract to be 7. So I know my 2 needs to go over here, so I can get that 8x squared. And then the inside would be x squared. So to make it positive 7 plus minus, plus minus. All right, now this one, you can actually factor that 4x squared minus 1 a little bit further, called difference of squares. So now I can break it up 2x and 2x. The x squared plus 2 we cannot factor further. It's not a difference and they're not squares. So then multiply to be 1, we go 1 and 1, 1 plus, 1 minus. So now I have it completely factored. Now I'm going to set each of my factors equal to 0 and solve. All right, so this one, we're going to subtract that 1 and then divide by 2. So x equals negative 1/2. This one, I'm going to add the 1 and then divide by 2. X equals positive 1/2. And then the last one, we're going to subtract that 2. Then I need to take the square root of both sides. Don't forget, when you take the square root of both sides, you need to write plus or minus. So plus or minus square root of negative 2. Remember, if you get the square root of a negative, that means it's going to be I. So square root of negative 1 would be I times the square root of 2. All right, so these are going to be your answers. So let's count how many answers we have. There's 1 answer, 2 answer. Now the plus minus case, that gets you 3 and 4 answers. So we had 4 answers. If we go back up and look at the problem, it was to the 4th power, the degree. That's how many answers you should be getting. Okay, so that's good. All right, go ahead and pause the video and try the next one. Try to factor the quartic on number 8. All right, this one again had difference of squares. So your answer should have been 2 and negative 2 and 2, and then plus or minus I. Okay, let's go ahead and look at an example of factoring by grouping with the solving. So you've got that first group. We can take this time a 4x squared out and then write what you would have left. So we'd have x minus 1. And then for the next one, we can take a 9 out. Okay, so then both of them have that x minus 1. So we're going to pull that x minus 1 out front. So go x minus 1. And then what would we have left? So if those cancel, we'd have 4x squared. And then over here, if those cancel, we'd have plus 9. All right, oops. So now, again, if that were a minus 9, we could break it down further. Since it's a plus 9, we can't do that. So we're just going to now set each of our factors equal to 0. Now, something to notice on this one is our highest exponent, our degree there was 3. That means we should be getting 3 answers. So you can double check that. All right, here we go. So we're going to subtract the 9, divide by 4, and take the square root. Don't forget, when you do the square root, we need that plus or minus. Now that negative I can pull out front, and then I'm going to do the square root of 9 over the square root of 4. So that it becomes x equals plus or minus, square root of 9 is 3, square root of 4 is 2, and then square root of negative 1 is I. Forgot to finish that first one. And x equals 1. So x equals 1, and plus or minus 3/2 I. All right, go ahead and pause the video and try that last one. One thing to note on this last one, so that one you'll do like what you think. If, like in this second group, that first number is a negative, you want to take a negative number out. So since the 12 was negative, let's take a -4 out. That way we can try to get those insides to match up. All right, go ahead and finish that one up, and then pause the video. All right, for that last one, your answers should have been 2/3, -2, and 2. So go ahead and do the worksheet 5.3 part 1 for tomorrow, and make sure you have the right amount of answers as that highest exponent. So again, this one we wanted 3 answers, so that's what our highest exponent was. So, all right, have a great day. Let me know if you have any questions.